We're going to start off by talking about these grids and how they're set up, and also the terminology that we're going to use to refer to them. So just so you're aware, if you took a typography class, you would probably learn, or you definitely learn different terms than what we're going to use. We're using terms that make sense for hand lettering capital sans-serif letters. So let's just start off by looking at this grid. This, even though it may look like, because of the way the lines we have are, that these squares are all different heights and widths, they're actually all the same. So this is, you can kind of think of it like graph paper. All of these squares on this entire grid are the same width, same height. Okay, so we are going to have each of our capital letters is going to fit within this space. In other words, they're all going to be 3 units tall. A unit is a square. Okay, so we are going to refer to this as our cap height because all of our capital letters are going to fit within this space. Now the first line down here is going to be called our baseline. This is the line that the letters rest on. So it's our first line here. Or you can kind of think of this as line 0. And then we have our line 1, line 2, and line 3. So these are evenly split between these squares, so 3 units tall. Now we also have on here this thin red dotted line, and this is our midline. So this is going to be halfway between the baseline and the cap height. And this is just to help us out for some of the letters that have a line that or they have some sort of reference point where we need the middle. For example, the letter H, we're going to be putting the crossbar directly through the middle, so that's why we have the red line there, just to help us out. But for the most part, we're going to be using these squares. Many of the letters are going to be 2 units wide, but we will talk about each letter, and they're all going to be 3 spaces tall. Okay, so as we start going throughout these letters, you'll see we're going to refer to these lines, and the purpose of using the grid is just to get the proportions of our letters right and keep them consistent. Okay, so we are going to get started with our first set, and let's go from there. All right, the first set of letters that we're going to review are ones that have only horizontal and vertical straight lines. Now there will be 3 bonus at the end of this video that also have a long diagonal, but they're not too complicated. Okay, so we're just starting off with the very basics. So let's start with the letter I. So I is just going to be a straight line, straight vertical that is 3 units tall, or our cap height. All right. So if you wanted to add a sort of variation to it, you could add these 2 horizontal lines to the top and bottom that are 1 unit wide. All right, next is the letter L. L is 3 spaces tall, and it's going to come out 2 spaces wide. T is next, so let's start with our stem here. 3 spaces tall, and then it's also 2 spaces wide, directly centered above our stem. H is next, so we'll start with 2 vertical lines that are 2 spaces apart, and then we have our crossbar here in the middle that's going directly through the middle. Okay, next is F. So F will be, of course, 3 spaces tall. Now this top horizontal stroke is going to be 2 spaces wide, 1, 2. The middle one, which we're going to put on this crossbar, is actually going to stop before we get 2 spaces wide, so it's 1.5 spaces horizontally, like this. E, same thing as the F, 2 spaces wide, top and bottom horizontal strokes, and then we're going to have this crossbar come 1.5 spaces like this. Okay, so those were all of the very most basic letters that have only horizontal and vertical lines. We're going to move into 3 more for this lesson that are based on vertical lines but also have some diagonals in them. So the first one is M. This is also the first letter that's going to be wider than 2 spaces, so the M is going to be 3 spaces wide. So let's start off with our vertical line, and then we can count 1, 2, 3 spaces out here. And then we're going to connect the top corners down to the middle. So you can either imagine it or you can put a little dot right there and then just connect the top corners down like that. Next is N. N, we're going to have two vertical lines that are 2 spaces apart. So this is not as wide as the M. And then just connect the top left and the bottom right. Another variation on the N that you could do is start off the same way, 2 spaces apart, and then instead of connecting at the bottom right corner right here, you're going to connect it about where 1 space up is. So from this top corner down here. That's just a different look for the N. Okay, and then Z, we're going to make 2 horizontal lines that are 2 spaces apart, and they're stacked on top of each other vertically, and then connect them this way. All right, so those are all of the lines that are just pretty basic horizontal and vertical lines, and then a few connecting diagonals.